There seems to be a rise of the dark matriarchy. Beginning with Lilith, it's believed by some, according to Babylonian mythology, that she was the first wife of Adam, the first rebel woman who was banished from the Garden of Eden. She was a sorceress, very conniving and very wicked demon. According to Babylonian Talmudic accounts, Lilith ran off with an archangel, Samael. Lilith is the source of powerful chaos magic. There are accounts of Lilith in the Bible, in Isaiah. It describes Lilith in imagery that would include desert animals, owls especially. So you'll see images of Lilith with serpents and dragons, owls, hybrids and chimeras, and also depictions of vampires. This is that spirit of Lilith, the she-demon. Along with the night predator reputation, there's also a reputation attached to Lilith as a child snatcher, as well as being very vain, hair obsessed, an evil temptress. This serpent queen also celebrates nakedness. Let me talk about the iconic queen, Jezebel. Yes, she embodied the spirit of Lilith, and she herself born to a king, so then marries into a kingdom. So she married King Ahab, who was powerful in name only because she domineered. She was the powerful matriarch of that power couple, and she demanded that everyone worship her gods. So she comes with a whole cult religion in this marriage, but demanded, because of her outvoting all of the prophets, that everyone bow knees to her gods. So the prophets were on the run because she was having them all murdered, assassinated. So they were running into the caves to, flee the annihilation. And she was also a very powerful temptress and seductress. Queen Jezebel was the power in the power couple for sure. Her husband, King Ahab, he wanted this piece of real estate. He was a typical rich guy, spoiled, and thought he could have anything because he was the king. So he was trying to get this man to sell this property that he wanted so badly. The man did not sell the property and told him he would not take any offer because it was ancestral land. Well, King Ahab pouted around. He didn't care. He still wanted the land. Well, his wife, she put into effect a series of events to make sure this man died. And then she gave the land to her husband. Now, the prophet Elijah heard about this, and he pronounced judgment over this action. And he did prophesy that Jezebel would die a horrible death, and the dogs would eat her body. And that is what the account says happened to her. She was pushed out of a window and wild dogs ate her. And King Ahab didn't make out too well either. And that pretty much took the ascent to the throne away from him. So his Game of Thrones was over. Another very powerful priestess, like Queen Jezebel, was another royal named Medea. Now, Medea, she was very well versed in nature. She knew how to mix herbs and potions. So anybody that she wanted in terms of love interest, she could whip up a love potion. Anyone that she wanted to get rid of, a rival, competitor, she would send gifts that were poisoned. Basically, poison blanket type of stuff. Yeah, poison clothes. And she rode around on a golden chariot given to her by her grandfather. Yes, a chariot that is powered by dragons and serpents. And basically, in this universe, there are lots of mystical animals, lots of chariots to ride around, powered by demons and dragons and serpents and snakes and all kinds of things. She was also known to do anything to make her man, her love interest, win at life, to outwit his enemies as well and competitors. She could do lots of crafty things. She was a chaos magician. And just as Queen Jezebel came to a very untimely end, as the chaos magic backfires on the practitioner, no matter how much they know about nature and herbs and potions and lotions and all kinds of things, sigils, it always backfires. And the desire to control and dominate people often backfires very tragically. And this was the case with Medea, who her love potions and love spells backfired. Even though she thought she got what she wanted for her lover, she ended up losing in the end. Well, Medea was so conniving and up to so many shenanigans that she felt that her children were keeping her back from the man that she truly wanted. And she was willing to kill her children to be with this man. We have modern cases of women doing similar things to Medea, killing her children so she could be with a man. If you remember Susan Smith, who drowned her 2 sons to be with a man. Well, even so many years in prison, they say that she is such a wicked monster that the people that go in, you know, missionaries and people like that, evangelists, they say that they would not believe that she could ever transform when they are in her presence. She has been described as being so evil. This is a monster of a woman. And we can't forget that she blamed it on a black man. She said a black man took her children when in fact she pushed the children while they were strapped in seatbelts into a lake. Well, this is the intersection that brings in the 1800s with Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. If I didn't say that if I didn't pronounce it right, so sorry. And then Friedrich Nietzsche. Both of these men were very influential German poets. Now, Goethe, who wrote Faust, he was so many things: a poet, a playwright, a scientist, statesman, and considered the greatest, most influential man in literature. And he was often quoted by people, as well as many composers of the day set his poems to music, and that would include Beethoven and Mozart. Friedrich Nietzsche, being the father of nihilism, he was very much influenced by Goethe. His magnum opus, this is Goethe, which is Faust, is a story of soul peddling, a man that makes a deal with Mephistopheles or Mephisto, and he is bored in his life, in his studies, and he wants to go off onto magical adventures, and he gets caught up in a lot of drama, but he had signed a contract in blood to Mephisto that he would be given this adventurous life full of so many things and experiences. And his part of the bargain was that he would never grow tired or bored. And he sought youth, and he got into all kinds of entanglements with women that ended up in a woman killing her baby and being put in jail. And he killed the woman's brother or something. They were involved in murder. And you can just see the mess and the just shipwreck that it made this man's life. But the perversion of Faust, which they make references to the Bible and to a lot of mythology. So you'll see a lot of mythical creatures, you know, the serpents and the dragons and the chimeras. And one of the things that is highlighted in Faust is this twisted perversion of good and evil in this sort of uniting things and balancing the polarities, redemption being something that you could make a bargain for instead of submitting to Jah. And because Goethe was into theatrics as well, very over-the-top visuals and colorful depictions of the gods and goddesses, but especially the goddesses was his focus. And many of them you can see in the artwork of the time, the social milieu. This was the culture. You can see in the furnishings, the, Rococo era. This Rococo era that he so fabulously wrote about, I call it a Babylonian revival, where you can see the celebration of nudity, of partying, and all the mythical creatures and goddesses. So goddess worship. Wouldn't Lilith be so proud? And Jezebel. So you'll see the serpents, the dragons, the Sphinx, the chimeras all through the architecture and artwork, marked by extreme excess, hedonistic materialism to the point of insanity and self-destruction. Nietzsche was so impressed with Goethe that he considered him an ancestor. Now, the irony of Nietzsche is, by his mid-40s, he had just suddenly collapsed and lost all control of his mental faculties, and he was declared non compos mentis, which is of unsound mind. Now, he lost all of his memory and was just plunged into madness. He couldn't sleep. He had to take heavy narcotics just to get sleep. And this is a man who famously quoted, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." How many times have we heard that? He ended up being cared for by his mother and his sister, Elizabeth, who she kept up with his writings, and she even completed some of his works and had them published. And it just goes to show that God will not be mocked. And that's what Nietzsche did in a lot of his work. Another influential movement that grew out of Goethe's writings was something called the Bauhaus movement out of Germany. And it's quite a juxtaposition from the Rococo just extravagance. This is a more pared down art movement which sought to combine all of the craft and to unify them in a principle of mass production. Like a monster leap into modernity, preparing people for what would come next, the Industrial Revolution. There was a young German occultist named Rudolf Steiner. Now, Rudolf Steiner was somewhat obsessed with Goethe's work. He worked at the archives in which all of Goethe's work was compiled, and he took it a step further by creating what he called Goetherian, or whatever. These were cultural centers, performance halls, galleries, bookstores with libraries, lecture halls for educational purposes, administrative buildings, research and conference areas. And this was all dedicated to the work of Goethe. This tribute by Rudolf Steiner to the work of Goethe, it was directed at people that were teachers and farmers, doctors, therapists, other professionals that would come together for these special conferences. Rudolf was an occultist again. He had experiences in the paranormal from the time he was a child. He had these mystical experiences. So he was a social reformer, and the aesthetics and everything, you can see how this was going towards mass production, like corporate type of structures, clean and streamlines. That was more of the sort of taking it a step further in clean lines from the Art Deco. So this is a form of that Art Deco. And with that is that whole push into the modern era of, you think, Metropolis, or, you know, all of those sci-fi type of things, but you can still see the type of architecture from the Antediluvian with their heroes and idols embedded in the architecture. Rudolf Steiner, in fact, created his own system of education called Waldorf schools, and it is also referred to Steiner education. This esoterist, occultist, social reformer, his schools, they merge the muses of artistic media, drama, music, dance, and architecture. Sort of like a Tower of Babel for the arts and literature, theater. A Babel art New World Order. Steiner, he promoted Goethe's work with herbs and that type of healing, so they combined the occult to even use mistletoe when it's harvested according to the planets to cure cancer. And this Babylonian Renaissance got into a more higher level when Steiner combined forces with Ukrainian Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. So by this time, Madame Blavatsky had moved from Ukraine to New York City, and she was bringing this Babylonian Renaissance to America. So she had her own lodge called the Theosophical Society, and that is what Steiner joined in with her work to bring this Renaissance and movement into America. So they both shared similar childhoods where they had experiences with otherworldly entities. Now, Blavatsky, she was from an elite family. So her father was some type of military, personnel, and her mother was a famous writer. So she was able to take what Steiner was doing and bring it into the elite society. So they were having seances in mansions and things like that. So now I can see why it was so prevalent in what we thought innocent times for Americans to be involved in so much supernatural activity. Something interesting about Madame Blavatsky's background. Again, it was an elite background, and the people in her family were deeply involved in the various secret societies and Masonic lodges in Ukraine. So as a child, they say that she was such a genius, she would read all of those books with the secret esoteric knowledge of, these flood antediluvian times. So she was very aware of the mythical world. And I have to get a little mud flood in there. The architecture in Ukraine is absolutely fascinating. So we have the combination, as you can see, of the Rococo, as they call it, and also there are lots of mystical creatures on a lot of the architecture, lots of chimeras and ocean entities, mermaids and things of that nature. I'm sure Madame Blavatsky had a lot to say about that, those myths. Okay, I'm about to make a really odd connection. Remember I talked about Nietzsche and his sister Elizabeth, who she had to care for him when he fell into that mental state where he just fell apart. Now, his sister curated all of his work, and she made sure that Nietzsche's work moved forward to promote all of that terrible nihilism. Now, another sister who carried forth the work of her brother is none other than Donatella Versace. Now, let's do some connecting of mythical creatures in this dark matriarchy. Donatella Versace, she comes from a part of the world realm that's used to seeing a lot of these mythical beings. It's not something that's so strange. She would probably have something very interesting to say about them being mythical. I'd love to know if you knew about these versions of the Sphinx Cat, because this is new to me. A lot of us have heard that the Sphinx Cat predates the pyramids over in Giza, which just makes untangling these timelines a little more challenging. Sort of like a cat tangled them all up, huh? And speaking of Donatella Versace and fashion, it's also curious that the runway of fashion is called the catwalk. Walk like an Egyptian, walk like a sphinx, walk like a cat, a feline on the catwalk. The Versace fashion luxury brand is synonymous with that Lilith, serpent, dragon, that old figure, Medusa herself. I'm not so sure that Gianni Versace knew what he was awakening when he brought the Medusa Lilith power to fashion. His obedience was rewarded. He amassed a fortune, had homes all over the world, and looking at this one here in Miami, I hadn't realized that he had an observatory with a telescope. Hence, they're really into the stars, right? He lived like an ancient king or emperor and really loved this symbol of Medusa, having it everywhere in his home. So again, Medusa, I look at them all the same. Medusa, Lilith, and Jezebel, all of these cults of the dark matriarchy. But he had all of this stuff. Look at this fountain in his home. Oh my gosh, do you see the observatory up there? And look at the interiors. What do you think of that? Do you think it's really like tacky, or do you think it's fabulous? Put it down in the comments. I want to know. I'm not trying to offend you if you have a Versace home. I can only imagine the mansion parties there. And I didn't realize that there was a Versace amaretto, celebrating a lot of those ancient gods and goddesses of parties, revelry, and also the muses of creativity. This is also seen in the duality of a lot of these things, so you can just see that the life is one of great hedonism. And imagine, look at that rug. It's a lion, so disrespectful of the animal kingdom. And yeah, he opened a gate to a destructive force. And he was murdered in front of his home in Miami. And I noticed that the movie that depicted this crime, they called it an assassination. It's interesting how certain people's deaths by murder are considered assassinations in the press. But the man that did it, Andrew Cunanan, I remember I used to watch the news around that time. His name was terrifying because the media repeated this story and they made it sound like he was in your backyard because he was on the run all over the country. It was quite a terrifying time. Another prominent design feature seen in the Versace brand is what they term a Greek key. And I'm learning that so many things predate what they've told us in history, which this Greek key does as well. So it goes back to very ancient times, Antediluvian, where this key was seen as, it's a meandering labyrinth, but it's also seen in art where this was some sort of divine ascent that was given to a king from Ishtar. In other words, Lilith. And you can see this imagery that's been sublimated into brooches as well as amulets that have magical powers and are used for protection even. I am of the belief that Gianni created the supermodel. So he took the model, fashion model, to a higher status, a star. And this wasn't seen until his brand came with the power of Lilith, the mother goddess, the dark matriarchy. And another thing that I saw happen, and you could say this was a marriage made on Mount Olympus, was the combining of this alchemical fashion line with its symbology that dates back to ancient knowledge. There was a marriage between fashion and music. The most powerful marriage with these arts, the aesthetics and the muses and sirens of the music industry. However, before going to the music industry, let's look at something real quick. One of Versace's best-known creations, actress Elizabeth Hurley made the dress a household name by wearing it to a red carpet event. A fashion insider said that the dress defined the paradoxes of a controversial new generation feminism which celebrates empowerment in the act of attracting and manipulating a male gaze. The version of this iconic dress that Elizabeth Hurley wore on the red carpet, she wore one that had safety pins, 6 safety pins on each side. So this 90s dress was referred to as that dress. It catapulted her into superstardom. And Gianni's own sister, Donatella, rocked the dress, as well as she took over once her brother was assassinated, and she did some amazing things in terms of taking the brand forward and using her own brand of alchemy magic. The collaboration with the Muses of Music has been very advantageous for the Versace brand. The vintage dress is seeing a resurrection among a lot of the young muses. One in particular was seen recently on a red carpet, and they say that the dress was so sexy that it left her fans levitating. Well, here's quite an entanglement. 90s supermodel Cindy Crawford, who famously wore the bondage dress, Her daughter, who is also a model, Kaya, wore the dress on her 18th birthday. And hold on, the entanglements get even weirder. Kaya comes from one of these super couples. Her parents are super successful. She and her brother, very successful. So she's a model and she's, well known. She's been entangled with Pete Davidson, which there was a lot of drama. And you can see from the picture of her parents where they were trying to help out with some kind of drama going on. Now, Pete has been known to have some really disturbing behaviors. And one of the things that he does is he will threaten to commit suicide if a woman wants to break up with him. And he gets tattoos of the women that he just basically started dating. Now, the entanglement will get even weirder. Hold on. Well, none other than Lilith's own Kim Kardashian also donned the bondage dress. And yes, more entanglements. Hold on. The uber powerful temptress siren Kim Kardashian now is with this very strange man, Pete Davidson. And yes, he has tattoos of her on his body. Of human bondage, these entanglements, and this power, this Lilith serpentine power. Reconsidering a lot of this fashion, it has such an oppressive nature to it. And basically, they let us know that fashion wants slaves. Slaves to fashion. This women's empowerment, these sirens, this bondage and entanglement, you often wonder who is really in bondage here. Donatella is definitely casting some powerful spells, and she knows the ancient craft, coming from the land of the heroes of renown. And this coveted brand, this Medusa Lilith brand, is sought out by people that are urban, hood, from the top socialites. They want to be seen in this Medusa Lilith fashion. A highly hypnotic brand, this Medusa Lilith magnetism. It is a brand of adventure, of travel to exotic places, and again, ancient magic. Sasha Fierist, getting bonded, getting bodied. Donatella giving Queen Vampire vibes. And whenever I see her in pictures, it's like she's holding court. Everyone wants to be seen in a picture with her. It's not the other way around. She is the one they want to be seen with, young and old. Donatella recently paid a visit to an industry slave, Britney Spears. The obsession with youth and the willingness to undergo many enhancements that can be dangerous. This is a central theme in this cult of Lilith, this Medusa Beauty. I was surprised to learn that the Versace brand has remained so powerful over these decades, and especially after the death of the main person. It is such an appeal to youth, and it is a lifestyle brand. So I was quite surprised again. How about you? Did you know this? The brand was even featured in a rivalry between Biggie and Tupac. Tupac claiming that Biggie stole his Versace style. Who knew? You now saw the hip-hop, rap, R&B celebrities and stars wanting to be seen in Versace. The mannequins seem like muses. Come on in, shop. Why don't you? The Medusa Lilith. She leads from the nether regions. Now, even though Versace has that urban kind of edge, the Hamptons girls are really about that Versace as well. I'm seeing this Versace branding as being so confusing, chaotic, because of the contradictions, the juxtapositions. Now, Kourtney Kardashian, she got married in Vegas in a Versace vintage item. These lyrical wizards were wearing the Medusa brand when they were spitting verses. Check out some of this Medusa poetry. And hang the Versace robe up on a hanger, because I'm going to want to mention that in a little bit. This doesn't leave a lot to the imagination. If you recall, J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez, Jenny from the Block, she was wearing that infamous Versace jungle dress when some shenanigans went down with Sean Puffy Combs. And that jungle dress must have solidified a friendship between J-Lo and Donatella. J-Lo being seen with Donatella on many red carpets, they seem to be besties. And J-Lo seems to be bringing back this jungle dress. J-Lo and Donatella's alchemy has resurrected this jungle dress, and J-Lo was able to garner more worship as she walked the catwalk one more time. The allure and power, magnetism of that rococo. They seem to like globes a lot. I wonder why. Oh, look at this. Yeah. Men in Versace, not sure. Yeah, that Lilith, Medusa, motherhood, sorority, they have handbag obsessions. Yes, you are judged before you even open your mouth, according to your handbag. The in crowd. Who can obtain this level of luxury and glamour? Even from head to toe. The goddess Nike. And other goddesses and gods. They really love this brand. I can see now why. Cardi B. Look at that. So many. Even Pam Anderson. Yes. This brand has had some staying power, I have to say. Look at that. The children. That's the thing about this motherhood of Medusa, Lilith. The children are targeted for this kind of training. I call this right here the Lilith Starter Kit. Now, Donatella is joined in this fashion business with her daughter, Allegra. And the name Allegra means happiness. But looking at these pictures makes you wonder. The top socialite queen, especially of fashion, oh, they have harems as well. Even harems of men. And a collection of celebrities that would do anything to be seen in this coveted fashion. Imagine serving up 2 of your daughters to Lilith and her cult, passing them through the fires. If Mo Money, Mo Problems was a person, and that person was wearing Versace, of course, all the time and effort spent bonding people to Lilith pays off pretty well. One of the many homes that Donatella has. This one in the storied islands in the Mediterranean. This Medusa brand is a lifestyle that they sell. You could take a seat, you could have some tea, and you can put it on a plate, a mermaid plate, and have some Versace cake, of course. That makes sense. How about a skateboard? Yeah, this is such a lifestyle. Oh, there you are. You knew it was going to happen, right? A Versace car. Wow. And who would that be standing on the top of the Versace suicide door car? None other than 50 cents. I wonder, is it restful in these kind of spaces? That looks like a bulletproof vest. And I notice a lot of the interracialness, the swirling of it all. Have you noticed that in the advertisements? And the pride. The corporatized social justice warrior. Donatella seems ageless as these K-pop stars are mesmerized. Look at what fashion has done to the male image. Lilith, Medusa, Jezebel, Medea, they are the queens of the feminist movement. I haven't done an Instagool segment in a while. Shout out to Paul Romano. But yes, can you imagine people taking pictures in front of the gate that the designer's brother was assassinated? Wow. And getting married at the property. That doesn't seem like a good beginning to your fairy tale story. The property has been repurposed. It seems that it is some kind of very high-end Airbnb of some sort. And, you know, seems to be the place where you definitely want to get your Instagool pictures in. With the kids, of course. Now, circling back to the Medusa bathrobe. I mean, the Versace bathrobe. And I'm just naming this the Medusa bathrobe ritual. I'm not sure what's going on, but so many people want to be photographed on their travels, eating food. Looks like Rick Ross was maybe barbecuing in the Medusa bathrobe. What is that about? This young man wins the Instagool challenge. He's running through the hallway in his Versace robe, and he gets extra points for having a Starbucks in his hand. Will someone come and get their dad, uncle, brother, grandfather up in this Versace robe? Even the queen of talk show herself, look at her going through an airport in a Versace robe. What is going on? Medusa does give nice perks, trinkets, yes, stars on the walk of shame. It seems Donatella Versace has become one of the most powerful gatekeepers for the Medusa motherhood, marked by a deep desperation for youth and beauty and enhancements. Without filters and enhancements and all kinds of magic, this stuff could not be pulled off, these illusions. In this seed war, the seed of Eve versus the seed of Lilith, I've heard on good authority that Lilith, Medusa, and any of her sorority, they don't have that happily ever after, do they? Checkmate.